Hello and welcome. This is Tech Host Academy, and I'd love to share a new framework that I've just developed called the ADAPT framework. And when I think about this framework, I love the idea of there being like a keystone bridge of what do we do when someone disrupts our meeting. Now, we've had Zoom bombers, right? And Zoom bombers come in, and we use those wonderful host tools, the security tools that are already built into Zoom to do things like keep them from sharing their screen or turning off the videos or keep them from using the chat or renaming themselves. You can also at any time, especially if you have your participants list and they pop up at the top, you can, if they unmute and you know they're about to say something because you don't recognize who they are, you can always put them in the waiting room and you can always kick them out and report them to Zoom. But I'm talking about something that's a little bit more, I would say, sensitive. And so when someone comes into a meeting, probably a known person, and they start to disrupt, what do you do in that scenario? So I came up with this 5-step framework that you can do that will help you adapt to the situation. Now, the very first thing that we do is that we assess. So, assessing what's going on. And the first thing to do is feel into your body, right? As tech hosts, we are practicing equanimity, we're practicing presence, we're trying to keep our cool and our calmness. And when someone disrupts a meeting, notice how it feels in you. That's the first thing. And realize that it's probably happening to other people too. They're noticing. And so, first thing to do is if you need to take that deep breath, remember to exhale longer than you inhale because that's going to lower your pulse, your heart rate, so that you don't get too excited. Because we know that as soon as our anxiety goes up, we lose the creative centers of our brain and we have a hard time problem solving. And what is happening is someone's disrupting. Stay calm. And don't just tell yourself stay calm, actually physically exhale, and that's going to bring your physiological needs to a place where to a baseline where you can work with them. So notice how you're feeling and gauge the emotional temperature of the room before reacting. How is this coming forward? Now, in some cases, especially in corporate sessions, sometimes there can be a disruption that can be a great disruption and can create a wonderful opportunity for there to be a deeper conversation. What I'm talking about is someone that's coming in and making an unsafe place for people. And as a tech host, we want to make sure that we're creating an environment where people can thrive. So if you've already assessed that someone has come in and disrupted the atmosphere, figure out where do you need to show up in order to do the next step, which is diffuse. So, how do you diffuse the situation? Is it something that needs to be shut down completely? Is it something that can linger on a little bit because you're trying to figure out what to do and people are safe, but it's just uncomfortable? But you will need to think fast. So, address the disruption calmly. I like to say, unmute yourself and come on in with your smooth jazz voice to come in with a calm demeanor and come up with a constructive solution. So, what that might be is say, we hear you, or I heard you. I hear you. If it's something where they're being pretty polite, you can say, thank you for sharing that. I can feel how you might feel uh, upset about it, or kind of help them understand that they have been heard, that they have been listened to. A lot of times when we're in a physical meeting, we can see people's body language, and the person who is disrupting will know if they have power over or affecting people. But because we're all on Zoom, they kinda don't hear anything, right? And they may not be looking at all of everybody's videos. They might just be angry and coming online. And so just make sure that when you go to diffuse, ma come in with a calm voice and just match where you feel that they need to feel like they've been met, and then invite the person to either discuss it privately offline or okay, we heard you. If you need to talk about this more, maybe it's not appropriate at this time. Can we take it offline and offer to give them a resolution? How about after this session, I'll meet up with you or I'll send you an email. If they continue to disrupt, then you've got it's almost like you can create your own decision tree if you'd like to, based on the handout that I've given you here, and to say, okay, if they're nice, great, it's done, right? Just make sure they're muted and maybe keep an eye on them, right? That they're not going to turn on their camera and unmute again and disrupt again. Um, so that's one way to do it. And I will talk about how to prevent that in the first place, but there's a couple of different ways to diffuse that. The other thing is if they truly are disruptive and they're creating an angry or a really irritated environment where people don't feel safe to contribute, you can simply remove them. I have done that before where I've removed someone mainly because they kept unmuting saying they had technical issues, and I would tell them in the chat how to fix it, but they weren't looking at the chat. So I kicked them out of the meeting, and then I emailed them and gave them the instructions that they needed to do to come back in, just so that they weren't taking down the whole session. That doesn't happen so often anymore because people are so much more tech savvy online. However, it can. So those are a couple of different ways that you can diffuse the situation. Now, as soon as you feel like that's diffused, then this is the keystone. It really is the keystone to the entire piece. And that's why I love that keystone piece, that second A in ADAPT is assume noble intent. Now, good to have right in the moment, but definitely do this after the session. And so it's important to check in with each of the people that were affected by this and to communicate effectively. So for the person that you're caring for, like the person that might have been the victim or someone who feels like they were the one that were wronged, invite them to join you on a Zoom call immediately after the session, right? And to ensure that they are emotionally supported. Or if you have to kick someone out before you move on with the meeting, say, is everybody okay? Do we need to talk about this? Just to make sure people have an outlet if they just need to blow off some steam, right? For the offender or the person who's been disrupting, you might consider writing them a very neutral email that reflects the purpose of the session and the values of being a valued participant, meaning a good online citizen. And maybe even outline some very clear boundaries for future interaction so that you have set some expectation in writing. And so, assuming that noble intent is like, look, everything's good here. You're not being reactionary, you're being responsible and responding, and you can neutralize folks in that way. Then the fourth letter in the ADAPT framework is prevent. So establish values based boundaries from the beginning. You can set clear boundaries to ensure everyone understands the expected behaviors. And I'll give you a couple of scripts here in a moment that you can say before a session. And then finally, teach. So teach. You're tech hosts, and we want to make sure that everyone's a good online citizen. So share tools to encourage a positive learning space. We can all be great online citizens. So reinforce the boundaries through tone setting, and I'll talk a little bit about terms and tags and platform settings. But the idea here is that we really want to be able to adapt to any situation and model the way as good online folks. And the way we can do that is to watch a video, and this is also on the handout, but there's a video that I did about how to maintain equanimity and the importance of being able to do that as a tech host. So if you feel like, oh, I don't like conflict or that would make me nervous, then this video has some tools about maintaining equanimity when that happens. So let me give you a couple of examples. I talked about some scripts and some terms when we get to that prevent piece. So, when it comes to prevention, one of the best things you can do at the very beginning of a session is to have a script. Now, I don't say them all the time when we're at Tech Host Academy because we're all tech hosts, but sometimes I do model the way by saying things like, and let me show you the informal This one I would use in a more creative setting or when people are a little bit more informal. At the very beginning of a session, I may say something like, "Welcome, everyone. Before we dive in, let's quickly go over a few shared agreements to help us create a space where everyone feels safe, valued, and supported. We invite you to turn on your camera if possible to create a more connected and trusted community. We understand if you have low bandwidth, are away from your desk, eating, or caring for someone. So please do what feels right for you. If you're having any tech issues, please direct message me in the chat. For general questions or comments, please type three question marks and make sure that this is set to everyone and ask your question. This allows us to be able to see what other people are asking and build on that. But again, if you're having technical issues, you can direct message me anytime. Now, we're here to support each other, so let's keep our feedback kind, constructive, and encouraging as we learn and grow together. And if someone feels off, if any of you feel off or uncomfortable, please reach out to me privately and we'll address it in a way that supports everyone's experience. So, thank you again for helping to create a positive, engaging, and supportive space where we can all learn and thrive together. I'm so excited to get started. Now, that is just one example of a script. One time, I decided to invite folks before a session to get settled in. And I thought this will be a great opportunity for me to like say all the technical types of things that could possibly come up. And I wrote a script and it took me 20 minutes. I was like, it was like a teaching thing, but it was also like I'm setting tone thing. And it was a totally different kind of learning experience. So I wanted people to not assume that we just do things the old fashioned way. And I realized about 5 minutes in, I was like, "This is really long." So I kinda made it interactive and fun. But the reason why I share that is because you can decide what does the group need in order to be engaged, in order for the session to be efficient, and in order for everyone to have for it to be equitable so everyone has an opportunity to participate or contribute if that's the way your session is designed. So my main things are cameras on if you can. Oftentimes I'll say, please stay, this session is being recorded, so please stay muted so we have a nice clean recording that we can come back to. That's really optional if you are if you are recording the session. So that's more of an informal script. My formal script follows just about the same thing. However, I say things a little bit more, I would say, directly. So for the formal script, I'll welcome everyone. Before we dive into today's session, I'd like to quickly go over some shared agreements to ensure we have a productive and respectful experience together. Notice I paused and gave emphasis to productive and respectful. So, first, let's agree to respect each other's time and space. This means being present and engaged. That's like undertone of no multitasking, no checking emails or being somewhere else. And also being mindful if we need to step away for any reason. So in the corporate atmosphere, a lot of times we'll say, be here or be there, but don't be both. So you can have that kind of visual that's up on the screen. Again, this is corporate. We would never say that in a creative atmosphere where we don't want to like shun people before they did anything wrong, right? We don't want to shame anybody. We want people to feel welcome. But in a more corporate or productive space, we need to set some serious guidelines that we all agree to. And then we say something like, second, we encourage a supportive and constructive environment. If you have a question or comment, please share it in a way that's respectful to everyone. We're all here to learn and grow. So a lot of times, because it's a meeting, we're not a tech host might not be moderating the questions because it's not a presentation. It's like we're kind of all unmuted. So let's be respectful about that. And if at any point there's a disruption or something makes you feel uncomfortable, please let me know privately and we'll address it in a way that ensures everyone feels safe and valued. What that says is, I'm here to help create a space where we can be efficient and collaborative. And it kind of empowers them. Well, not kind of, it empowers them to share with me, like a speak through me kind of environment, that if something's going on, let me know. And then off to the side, you can say, should we address that person directly? Does this need to go to HR? Like it can get a little bit more nuanced and more formal in a way. And then lastly, let's keep things focused on the content, the purpose of today's session. If we need to take conversations offline or address any issues, we can always do that after the session. So again, creating um, that space, that formality in an online session could be very important, especially in the workplace, to keep things productive. And then always thank them. Thank you for helping create a space where we can all learn or be productive and thrive together. I'm looking forward to a great meeting or session. So these are those informal scripts. Now, one last thing that I want to share, that after you've done the ADAPT framework, say after the session, after you've checked in with the party that may have been harmed, and ask them, what is it that you need? Take sort of a restorative justice approach. What I want you to do is a little R&R, probably even before you go to the offender. And the R&R stands for reflection and reinforcement. Okay, so what does that mean? So after a session, take some time to reflect on how the disruption was handled and what could have been improved for future events. And then make sure that you are reinforcing. So, this is the second R. Follow up with a message to reinforce the values and encourage respectful behavior for future sessions. If you have any questions about the ADAPT process, would love to answer more in an upcoming online session, live sessions here at Tech Host Academy. Bring your issues to these and we can work them out together.